Imagine an element so powerful, so mesmerizing, that it literally glowed in the dark. A faint, ethereal light captured in a vial. In the optimistic dawn of the early 20th century, the world fell head over heels in love with radium. Discovered only a few years earlier by the pioneering Marie Curie, this miracle element promised not just light, but a new era of boundless energy, health, and modernity. It felt like holding the future in your hands. It quickly became the wonder material of its age, infused into the fabric of everyday life with reckless abandon. Radium wasn't just in labs, it was everywhere. Tonics laced with radium promised vitality and vigor, a radioactive fountain of youth. There were radium-infused chocolates, breads, even water coolers installed in homes and offices, offering a constant dose of this supposedly health-giving element. But its most dazzling, most commercially successful application, making things glow. And for hundreds, eventually thousands, of young women across America, particularly those from immigrant and working-class backgrounds, this glowing element offered something just as dazzling, just as alluring. A well-paying job, a sense of independence, a step up in the world. During the patriotic fervor of World War I and roaring straight into the jazz age of the 20s, factories sprang up like mushrooms, primarily in Orange, New Jersey, Ottawa, Illinois, and Waterbury, Connecticut. Their main product? Watches and military instruments, crucial gauges, airplane dials, clocks, whose numbers and hands needed to glow brightly in the dark. The secret ingredient? Radium paint. The workers tasked with this delicate, luminous work were almost exclusively young women, some as young as 15. They became known simply as dial painters. It wasn't just a job, it was considered an elite position for working-class girls. The pay was exceptionally good, often 3 times the average factory wage, granting these young women unprecedented financial freedom. They worked with impossibly tiny brushes, often made of camel hair, meticulously painting infinitesimal numbers onto watch faces, smaller than a grain of rice. The radium paint, mixed with zinc sulfide and an adhesive, shimmered with an otherworldly green-white light. By the end of their shifts, the fine, luminous dust coated their clothes, their hair, their skin. They became affectionately known as the Ghost Girls, because when they walked home through the darkened streets, they literally, faintly glowed. They embraced the glow. They thought it was a harmless, beautiful perk of the job. It felt glamorous. Before going out dancing or meeting friends after work, they'd playfully paint their teeth, fingernails, even eyelids with the leftover radium paint, amusing everyone with their eerie, radiant smiles and shining eyes in the dim light of dance halls. To achieve the razor-sharp point needed for the tiny numerals, they were explicitly instructed by their foreman, by the company training manuals, to use the lip-dip paint technique, moistening the brush tip between their lips, dipping it into the glowing paint, and then applying it to the dial. Lip, dip, paint, again and again. Thousands of times a day, every day, they were unknowingly ingesting pure radioactive poison with every pointed brush. But then, inevitably, things started to go horribly, terrifyingly wrong. It began subtly, insidiously, a persistent, bone-deep fatigue that sleep couldn't cure, a dull ache in their joints, initially dismissed as rheumatism or growing pains. Then came the excruciating toothaches. Dentists pulled the troublesome teeth, thinking it simple decay, but the empty sockets refused to heal. Instead, painful, festering ulcers formed, oozing foul-smelling pus. Their gums bled constantly. Their breath took on a strange, fetid odor. Soon, pieces of their jawbones began to loosen, to break away, sometimes removed by dentists with just their fingers. Their jaws were literally beginning to decay while still in their heads. Local doctors were completely baffled. Faced with these grotesque, unprecedented symptoms, they grasped at familiar diagnoses: syphilis, trying to shift blame onto the girls' supposed promiscuity; phosphorus poisoning, remembering the phossy jaw that afflicted matchstick workers. Anything but the radium, the companies relentlessly assured everyone was perfectly safe, even beneficial. More and more girls reported similar symptoms across the different factories. Crippling anemia that left them weak and pale, spontaneous bone fractures, legs snapping while simply walking down the street, vertebrae collapsing under their own weight. Then came the sarcomas, horrifying, aggressive bone tumors that grew with terrifying speed, distorting their limbs, consuming their bodies. Their skeletons, having absorbed the radium thinking it was calcium, were literally crumbling, decaying from the inside out. The horrific truth was becoming undeniable, at least outside the company walls. Radium, chemically similar to calcium, had been mistaken by their bodies for a nutrient. It had bypassed their natural defenses and settled deep within their bones, becoming part of their very structure. And there it remained, relentlessly emitting alpha, beta, and gamma radiation, day after day, year after year, bombarding their cells, corrupting their marrow, riddling their bodies with incurable cancers and relentless decay. The magical element that had made them glow with seeming vitality was now consuming them from within. The dream job, the path to independence, had become an agonizing, protracted death sentence. The companies knew, or at the very least, they had strong, damning suspicions long before the girls did. Internal documents, later unearthed, revealed a stark contrast in safety protocols. While the young dial painters were being encouraged to lick brushes coated in radium, the chemists, executives, and scientists handling the raw radium powder worked under vastly different conditions. They used LED screens for protection, wore masks, employed ivory-tipped tongs and specialized ventilation systems. Memos circulated discussing the known injurious effects of radium, the need for caution, the potential for harm. But production quotas were high, the demand for luminous dials was booming, and profits came first. Safety precautions for the girls were deemed too expensive, too time-consuming. Their health was expendable. When the girls started falling seriously ill, when the first horrifying deaths occurred, the companies didn't offer help, support, or even basic honesty. Instead, they circled the wagons. They launched a sophisticated, cruel campaign of denial, obfuscation, and disinformation. They actively interfered with independent medical examinations. They hired doctors and scientists onto their payrolls to release deliberately misleading studies claiming radium was harmless, even beneficial in small doses. They ruthlessly smeared the names and reputations of the dying women, whispering lies about syphilis and poor hygiene, trying to shame them and their families into silence, isolating them from support. They systematically blocked outside investigations, refusing access to their factories and records. They lied directly to the press, issuing statements full of reassurances and false science. They lied to the concerned families. Most cruelly, they lied to the girls themselves, looking them in the eye and telling them their horrific, disfiguring symptoms were completely unrelated to their work, that it must be some other personal failing. It was a calculated, cold-blooded, meticulously orchestrated cover-up designed solely to protect profits and avoid liability, even as their loyal workforce disintegrated, bone by agonizing bone. But some of the girls, despite their rapidly failing health and the immense power arrayed against them, refused to be silenced. Grace Fryer, one of the original dial painters from the Orange, New Jersey factory, became a reluctant leader. Suffering from severe bone decay, her spine collapsing, her jaw needing a cumbersome steel brace just to hold it together. She spent 2 long, exhausting years simply trying to find a lawyer brave enough, or perhaps foolish enough, to take on the monolithic U.S. Radium Corporation and its army of high-priced attorneys. Dozens turned her down, fearing the company's influence or doubting the case's chances. But Grace persisted. Finally, in 1927, a young principled lawyer named Raymond Barry agreed to take the case. 5 women, Grace Fryer, Edna Hussman, Catherine Schaub, Quinta MacDonald, and Albina Larice, became the plaintiffs. The press quickly dubbed them the Radium Girls. The companies immediately deployed their standard tactic: delay, deny, deflect. They filed endless motions, requested postponements, hoping the women, who were visibly deteriorating, would simply die before the case ever reached a courtroom. The girls were indeed weak, their bodies ravaged by radiation poisoning. Some were bedridden and had to be carried into depositions and hearings. Their jaws were partially or completely gone, replaced by gaping wounds. Their bones were as brittle as glass. During one harrowing pretrial examination, Catherine Schaub's arm literally fell apart, shattering into multiple pieces when she tried to raise it to take the oath. The horror was unimaginable. Despite the horrific physical agony, despite the company's relentless, cruel attacks on their character and morals in the press, they testified. With weakened voices through unimaginable pain, they told their stories. They described the lip, dip, paint technique, the glowing dust, the reassurances from their bosses, and the hell their lives had become. The press, initially skeptical, was horrified by their visible suffering and captivated by their quiet courage. Newspapers across the country picked up the case, splashing the gruesome details across their front pages. Suddenly, the world saw the grotesque reality hidden behind the beautiful, glowing watches. Public outrage exploded. These weren't anonymous, disposable factory workers anymore. They were tragic heroines, martyrs to corporate greed. Facing a public relations catastrophe and mounting legal pressure, the U.S. Radium Corporation finally agreed to settle out of court in 1928, just before the statute of limitations ran out. The settlement provided each woman with a lump sum and a small annual pension, plus coverage for all medical expenses related to their illness, a crucial concession. It was a tragically small amount, barely enough to cover their past debts, let alone provide for their futures. And it came far too late for most. All 5 original plaintiffs would be dead within a few years. But it was a victory nonetheless. They had forced a powerful corporation to publicly admit some measure of responsibility. More importantly, their bravery had dragged the deadly secret of radium poisoning out of the shadows and into the harsh light of public scrutiny. The Radium Girls' fight, however, wasn't just for themselves or for headlines. Their landmark case and the subsequent equally brutal legal battles fought by dial painters in Ottawa, Illinois, led by the incredibly tenacious Catherine Wolfe Donahue, who continued her fight even as she lay dying, had a profound and lasting impact that resonates to this very day. These cases became catalysts, forcing major reforms in workplace safety regulations and fundamentally changing labor rights in America and around the world. As a direct result of their suffering and struggle, stringent standards were eventually established for occupational exposure to radiation, protecting countless workers in the decades to come. Workers gained the crucial, hard-won right to sue their employers for damages resulting from labor abuse, negligence, and unsafe conditions. The very concept of occupational disease, illness proven to be caused directly by specific workplace conditions or exposures, was firmly solidified in legal and medical understanding. The immense suffering of the Radium Girls directly paved the way for the creation of vital worker protection agencies, like OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, decades later. Their ultimate sacrifice forced industries, scientists, and governments to finally, belatedly, acknowledge the undeniable truth that profits and progress could never justify the cost of human lives. The glowing, magical element that had promised so much light and wonder, and had ultimately delivered so much darkness and death, finally had its terrible dangers fully recognized and regulated. And it was all thanks to the unbelievable, unwavering courage of ordinary young women who fought for justice, for truth, and for the future safety of others, even as their own bodies were being consumed by the very element they worked with. Most of the Radium Girls, hundreds of them across the various factories, died young, often in horrific, agonizing pain from cancers and bone decay. Their grave sites, in some cemeteries in New Jersey and Illinois, still register low levels of radiation today, a chilling, permanent testament to the poison they carried within them. They were undeniable victims of rampant corporate greed, scientific hubris, and a terrifying ignorance about the power they had unleashed. But their legacy transcends victimhood. It is one of astonishing strength, resilience, and profound, world-altering change. They remain a stark, luminous reminder of the devastating human cost that can accompany unchecked industrial progress and the incredible power of ordinary individuals to stand up, speak truth to power, and fight for what's right, even and especially in the face of death itself.